Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to give you this lecture. It is a special time, so we need to give this lecture in an unconventional way. Today is March the 24th, 2020. I can read in the news that things are going terribly bad in Europe. I can feel everything you are feeling, and I know you are having a very difficult time. My name is EurasiaFoundationFromAsia-UCM. I work in Hubei University of Arts and Science. I live in Xiangyang City, Hubei Province, China, and Hubei Province is the center of the outbreak of the novel coronavirus. In these days, I have also experienced a lot. So here in this lecture, I want to share with you some of my feelings and some of my thoughts about cross-cultural communication in this event. We all know that the novel coronavirus is spreading at a rapid rate throughout the world. And before we come to talk about the factors of this virus, I'd like to quote an article from UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, which was published on March the 10th this year. The title of this article is "The Coronavirus Outbreak is a Test of Our Systems, Values, and Humanity." And in this article, we can find these sentences. If ever we needed reminding that we live in an interconnected world, the novel coronavirus has brought that home. No country can tackle this alone, and no part of our societies can be disregarded if we are to effectively rise to this global challenge. Our response to this epidemic must encompass and in fact focus on those whom society often neglects or relegates to a lesser status. Otherwise, it will fail. The health of every person is linked to the health of the most marginalized members of the community. Preventing the spread of this virus requires outreach to all and ensuring equitable access to treatment. This means overcoming existing barriers to affordable, accessible healthcare and tackling long-ingrained differential treatment based on income, gender, geography, race, and ethnicity, religion, or social status. The impact of the novel coronavirus distinctly shows the challenges facing human society today. Globalization is not something that you can ignore as you wish. Many common problems of mankind will continue to be highlighted, and the whole mankind will become a community of destiny with intertwined interests at some special moments. Like this moment, more than 500 years ago, the virus traveled on the merchant ship, the soldiers' horses, spread through commerce and war, and it often takes several years to cover the world. So this is a map showing the plague in the Middle Ages, the spread of this plague. In today's globalized world, the viruses can board airplanes, ride high-speed rail, and spread around the world at a very, very rapid rate. We all know that now. The virus knows no borders. It is a common challenge facing all mankind. To safeguard global public health, countries must join hands and stand shoulder to shoulder. The ongoing battle against the COVID-19 is a living proof of how much we belong to this community with a shared future and how urgently we all need to come together to build it. However, if we want to build it, we need to communicate effectively. But what we see in this event proved again how difficult it is to do so. different nations, different people make different choices. Some of these choices are political, some are personal, and some are cultural. We can see that the cultural differences become some barriers to this communication. So in this lecture, we will discuss these different choices on cultural understanding in 4 parts. Part 1 is about this question, how is China different? Part 2, bias and prejudice. Part 3, mask or not. Part 4, Chinese medicine. How is China different? We all know that we can agree on one thing, that although this virus outbreak in China, in China now, things are getting better. So in this part, I'm not going to boast about China's measures in fighting against the virus, and I'm not going to criticize it. It's criticize China's failure in the early stage. Either it is agreed that the Asian countries are doing better in fighting against this virus. In recent days, many Chinese people think that some of the measures taken by Chinese government cannot be duplicated in the Western world. So there must be something that is special, that is different about China. Let's take a look at this timeline first. On December the 30th, 2019, there were 27 cases confirmed. And then on January 21st, 2020, Wuhan was locked down. 10 days later, there were 10,000 cases confirmed. And then on February the 2nd, 2020, Huashengshan Hospital was delivered, and this hospital was built in 10 days. 10 days later, on February 12th, 2020, on this single day, in China, there were more than 15,000 new cases reported. And then 1 month later, March the 18th, 2020, on this day, it was reported that there had been just 34 new cases, and all of them were imported from overseas. This means that there was 0 new domestic case in China. In the weeks following the early spread of the virus, the Chinese government enacted quarantine measures and strict travel restrictions affecting hundreds of millions of citizens. In some hard-hit cities, residents have been unable to leave their apartments for more than a month, while transport between major population hubs has been limited or halted altogether. But this is not the point. We know that the European countries, even the United States, there are so many cities which are also enacting quarantine measures. The point is, what made China and the other Eastern Asian countries so different? Why did these Eastern Asian countries enact the quarantine measures so effectively? And what are the elements that prevent the other countries from doing the same thing? And here, please remember that when I'm talking about these differences, I only mean differences, not advantages or disadvantages. China is different because of these. Firstly, because of this grassroots organization. During the fight against the epidemic, China mobilized nationwide, from the central government to the grassroots street, from relevant volunteer organizations to community autonomous organizations. All grassroots organizations were rapidly activated. Management units were continuously refined, and all these were orderly integrated into the grid system. Here are some pictures of the grassroots organizations who voluntarily keep the order of the society. This strong ability to mobilize depends on the values of patriotism, dedication, and responsibility that people have in general. And there are some other pictures. We can find all these volunteers in the cities, in the village, and everywhere, literally everywhere. So this is China, but in some Western countries, we can also see people in order. But it is difficult for the governments to mobilize fragmented and diversified people to cope with the government actions when facing social problems. And when problems worsen, people are used to expressing opposition through street protests and expressing dissatisfaction through politics. So in the Western countries, in Italy, in France, we can see that people do not cooperate, do not follow the instructions from the government. In France, we can see people protest in the streets. In the United States, we can see that even in the epidemic, there are so many people on the beach enjoying themselves. And secondly, in China, there is a highly coordinated overall governance system. China has established a highly coordinated overall governance system. The government allocated the medical resources of the whole nation to support Hubei. Don't forget, they are the resources of 1.4 billion people. So Hubei province is not fighting on its own. This figure is Hubei province, and all these other figures represent different provinces. They came to help. We do not fight on our own. We help each other. All other provinces came to give pairing support to cities in Hubei province, and the whole nation is in an integrated, coordinated system. China's concept of human rights and its governance system emphasizes connectiveness, and it emphasizes the systematic solution of problems with its overall governance concept. Chinese people think that a simple emphasis on individual rights and freedoms, even individual fights, will make it difficult to achieve an effective response to the epidemic as a whole. So these are the differences. And here comes the difference between collectivism and individualism. With this difference also comes some cultural bias and prejudice. So in the second part, we are going to talk about bias and prejudice. Firstly, of course, there will be politics. Look here. In the news, White House pushes U.S. officials to criticize China for coronavirus cover-up. And we also have this Twitter of the New York Times. In New York Times Twitter, the Chinese government is doing the same thing with the Italian government, but in China the lockdown means cost of liberties. In Italy, the lockdown is a risk of economy for virus containment. So this is the New York Times standard, this double standard. This is the bias and prejudice. But I'm not going to focus on this political bias and prejudice. What I want to show is the bias and prejudice in cultural understanding. Although at the beginning of this lecture, we show that the coronavirus outbreak is a test of our systems, but we still need to admit that this crisis is a rare event, and it would be unfair to judge the validity of the whole system simply on the result of this virus, of this event. However, in this crisis, it is important for people to cooperate with the government, to obey the rules and follow the instructions, which happened to be something the Chinese people are very good at. It is a pity that the difference between China and the Western countries led to ideological dispute. When the Chinese people felt released in winning this silent war against the virus and celebrate the effectiveness of their social system, some Western countries, such as the US, Canada, Australia, and so on, they cannot accept that the Chinese system is working well in saving lives. So there are a lot of blames about violating the human rights and freedom. Here we need to understand there are two words often used to describe the Chinese effort. My question is, did China get better because of collectivism or authoritarianism? We know that neither of these two words, collectivism and authoritarianism, can accurately describe the Chinese society or the Eastern Asian society. In modern Western culture, both of these two words are not good words. Both of the words will lead to misunderstanding. For example, in collectivism, this word will remind you of an image of all these people come together without individuality, and authoritarianism will give you this image, which I will give no comment. So if you use these two words to describe the modern China, it will lead to a misunderstanding. Because although in the Confucian culture the family is more important than the individual, intersubjectivity is more important than the individual subjectivity, and the individual complies with its family harmony. It doesn't mean that the individual interests are denied. Actually, Confucianism is to reduce the ego, not the self. In the Confucianist culture, we are not going to eliminate the self. Thus, the ethical rationality of ancient Chinese Confucianism is understood as internalized and metaphysical. It is the nature of the subject and at the same time the object of conversion, the norm of society, and at the same time the ultimate pursuit. In Confucianism, the realization of the society and the realization of the individuals are both the pursuit, and sometimes they are the same thing. The basis of this value is organic connection between lives, not the justice, not the collectiveness. It doesn't have the distinct division between the rights and the obligations. That's why in this crisis, all Chinese people will feel the urge. Yes, it is the urge, an emotional urge, that we need to do something to prevent this virus, to help others. Chinese people take the nation as a big family, and everyone is part of it. Even when the government is not satisfying, even when the government is not doing a satisfying job, even when they are doing so, we still cooperate. Because fighting against the virus is the top priority and the personal feelings are not as important. That's why sometimes we cooperate actively and voluntarily. It is not because of some brainwash or authoritarianism. It's just a cultural choice. We choose to unite. We choose to have the same opinion. We feel we need to do something, like taking care of our families. We take care of each other. It's not obligatory. It's just our nature, our emotional choice. So here, we have one popular sentence in China. 这是我应该做的. And this is a sentence very difficult to translate because in English, we can translate this sentence into English and there will be different versions like, it is my duty, it is what I ought to do, you are welcome, and it's my pleasure to do so. But actually, all these four sentences cannot accurately express the cultural meaning. Because 这是我应该做的. Literally, it means it's what I ought to do. But actually, it's not about obligatory. It's not about following the rules. It's not about the reason or some rational choice. It's an emotional urge, as I mentioned. I want to do so. I need to do so. It's my nature. It's about my cultural choice. But then, of course, sometimes this culture might risk being taken advantage of, especially by the government. I mentioned that there are bias and prejudice, and it is mutual. The Chinese people also have different bias and prejudice to the Western world. For example, many Chinese people believe that the Westerners all focus on individual freedom, so that it is very difficult for them to stand together to fight the virus. And the Chinese people would like to criticize the expense of medical care in the United States, but choose to ignore the high efficiency of the system. I have this picture, a typical one. This picture was very popular for a few days in China. The Chinese subtitle gave a wrong translation, which means CDC confirms the first coronavirus case originated in the United States. Of course, it is a lie. But this picture was popular for a few days in China because the Chinese people would like to believe such a story. So there is bias and prejudice. And the bias and prejudice not only exist in the field of ideology, politics, medical system, and other macro levels. They also exist in everyday lives. A typical example is the mask. So here in part 3, I want to talk about this detailed case in our everyday lives, mask or not. The different attitudes of Chinese and Westerners on whether or not to wear a face mask, highlight the cultural differences between the two. It is a popular view that the Westerners do not wear masks because there are not enough masks in the market. It is true. But it is also true that the Westerners have a potential resistance mode to wearing masks. The Chinese people often wear masks. The air pollution might be one of the reasons. People even, look here. One reason might be the air pollution. We all know that the air pollution is going bad in China these years. And then there's another factor, the SARS experience. In 2003, there was this SARS crisis, and the Chinese people got used to face masks in this crisis. And then, in China, face masks even became a fashion. I'll show you some pictures. So people wear these masks because they think it's fashionable. They enjoy wearing such beautiful, funny, or lovely masks. And here are some other examples. We have some words, characters in these masks. And this one is a popular star in China, and this one. Okay. The Chinese people often wear masks. The air pollution might be one of the reasons. People even wear the masks as fashions. The point is, Chinese people do not resist it. In the pandemic, wearing a mask to the Chinese is never just about protecting yourself. It is also a protection to others. Here we have this common understanding in China. If everyone wears a mask, then the virus will be stopped from spreading. In this philosophy, everyone is part of the whole picture. Everyone wears a mask to protect each other. The Chinese people focus on self-restraint, so we never take masks as a marker of sickness or a restriction of freedom. We just need to wear it. It's just something we ought to do, and all of us are willing to do it. There will be no exception. Everyone needs to do it. The Chinese cannot understand why Westerners believe that only sick people wear masks. There may be some different reasons, but I think there might also be some cultural understanding in it, which caused this understanding about masks. We do not understand. We can find that in the Western world, there are people who resist face masks. Here we have some news. Coronavirus Chinese student in Sheffield attacked for wearing face mask. And this one, coronavirus hate attack. A woman in face mask allegedly assaulted by man who calls her diseased. It's not only about Chinese people. Look here, an Italian lawmaker was insulted in a meeting because he wears a mask. The Westerners have a different understanding. Firstly, they think that why should I wear a mask if I'm not sick? This question shows that when talking about masks, many Westerners focus just on themselves, the isolated selves, without considering other people or the whole picture. They do not think it is obligatory. They think it is a violation of their individual freedom. So please remember, you do not wear a mask just for yourself. The Chinese people always understand that. But the Westerners, most of the Westerners just focus on the individualism and freedom. Secondly, because the Western culture is based on a dualistic worldview, which will divide the world into two opposite sides. So in this event, there will be a clear distinction: the healthy people and the sick ones. A mask would be the marker of the sick ones. A healthy person should not wear a mask because it is wrong. It breaks the rules and will undermine the understanding about sickness. That's why some Westerners will feel it is annoying and sometimes offensive to see a healthy people wearing a mask. And thirdly, there might be something else. A mask might not be political expression. Why do I say so? Because a mask should never be used in public spheres. The modern Western civil society is based on public spheres, in which the rules are liberty, equality, individuality, and so on. In public sphere, if someone covers up his or her face, the Westerners will feel that there cannot be an open communication based on equality, just because you cover your face up. So face covering can be an actual violation to the public sphere, to the basic rules of the communication. I think that this is why some people fight over mask issues these days. So totally, in my opinion, among all the other factors, Westerners do not like masks because of some basic values like dualistic worldview, individuality, freedom, and so on. And the next part, this is part 4, Chinese medicine theory. In China, there was a single case which caused a huge controversy. It is said that an unregistered doctor cured several COVID-19 patients with traditional Chinese medicine technique. Look here, this is a picture of this doctor. Dr. Li. He has claimed to have treated and cured 9 COVID-19 patients by using the acupoint injection therapy method that is not only simple and direct, but also affordable and effective. This is done by injecting 0.05% of phenol into a corresponding acupoints in accordance with traditional Chinese medicine's acupuncture principles. However, what needs to be pointed out is that the phenol is a high-risk poisonous chemical. The attention this doctor have garnered has invited investigation from the authorities. The report revealed that Li had allegedly engaged in illegal practice, put out misleading advertisements, and falsified, altered, bought, and sold medical practitioner certificates during the period of the outbreak. So the Chinese National Health Commission announced his medical practice illegal, but there are many civilians, many people in China, they announced their support in the internet to this Dr. Li. There was this huge controversy. Actually, behind this is the ironic fact that the strongest supporters and the strongest opponents of Chinese medicine are all Chinese. The supporters will say that the Chinese medicine system is integrated, comprehensive, and beyond the development of Western medical science. But the opponents will say that the Chinese medical theory is not even scientific. I think this is also a cultural conflict. In China, this controversy represents the conflict between traditional Chinese culture and modern Western culture, and this contradiction was intensified in the crisis of COVID-19. If one uses the widely accepted testing standards that are the core of science, namely defensibility, testability, measurability, and provability to analyze Chinese medicine, it would be easy to believe that it is not scientific. But then, the supporters will announce that the traditional Chinese medicine is transcendental, not superstition. It is based on thousands of years of experience, so it doesn't need to be proved by the standard of modern Western medicine system. And the traditional Chinese medicine system is closely connected with traditional Chinese worldview, so the failure of Chinese medicine will be a heavy blow to the whole traditional Chinese culture. This is also a possible reason that many Chinese will do whatever they can to defend Chinese medicine. And in this debate, there can hardly be the distinction between right and wrong. But this conflict will be a hindrance in fighting against the virus. So all these four parts, I just mentioned the different choices from three different levels. First, the macro scope level, the whole system of the cultural understanding, the organization of the Chinese governance, and in the second part, I have mentioned a detailed case, wearing mask or not. And in this third part, I just discussed the cultural conflicts inside the Chinese society in this fighting against the virus. Based on all this discussion, we need to understand that all human beings live in one global village and the future of each nation are closely linked. It is even more prominent and real in the face of this pandemic. The virus does not distinguish between the East, the West, the East and the West, the black and the white, the rich and the poor, the tradition and the modernity. Humanity as a whole has once again stood at the crossroads. We need to take action, sincerely coordinate and communicate and unite to cope with the global spread of the pandemic. But in this cultural communication, there might be all kinds of difficulties, barriers, and obstacles. In this lecture, I have given some examples. I can give no conclusion. This short lecture cannot solve such a huge problem. What I want to show you is that even when we have the goodwill and the good intention, even when we have the decision to cooperate and communicate, the cultural difference still exists everywhere, and it is hard to move it away. These different cultures made us who we are. To overcome the gaps between cultures, a goodwill is not enough. We need profound understanding and a clear cultural conscience. And we need you, me, everyone to come together to make a better future for us all. So let's unite. Let's try our best to communicate effectively. Let's try our best to understand each other. And let's stand together to fight this virus. I hope you all can be better, and I hope that the whole world will overcome this crisis soon. That's all. Thank you.